So with that, let's open it up for questions or comments. And as I said earlier, there's no HUD people here, so you can be open and honest. Hunter.
Denise, I was out, I don't know if you covered it, but I'm sure the group would love to hear the status of the meeting you were to and what's going on in Washington.
Yeah, I talked a teeny bit about that. I think you guys had stepped out for just a minute to have a conversation. It was really a great group of folks. As I said, it was really the decision makers at HUD that had called this together. Folks from the Office of the Inspector General were there. They're actually taking the lead on pulling together the comments. It was mostly attorneys, two other folks, myself and one other person that was not an attorney in the room, and from all of the big HUD law firms around the country that are actively involved in HUD compliance issues on a daily basis. It was very, I was telling the guys telling David at dinner last night, it was a very open forum. It was, okay, what do you want to talk about? And so people obviously were talking about all of their different pet areas. So it was kind of, there wasn't an agenda per se, but it really, at the end of an hour and a half, every single important area got covered. They talked about how quickly the regulations might get changed. They talked about potentially limiting some of who needs to report on 2530. They talked about more clearly identifying which projects have to be covered. They talked about, in the world of HUD flags that I mentioned, they talked about putting the policies and practices into writing so people understood why, in more comprehensive location, why a flag gets placed, what their ability is to address those flags with HUD, who they go to first, when they need an attorney, when they should move up the ladder, that kind of stuff. They really across the board, the room, knowing, as you said earlier, that HUD really, has been talking about 2530 regulation changes for a decade, and we haven't really seen anything except a couple little HUD memos, and the most recent of which came out, over 5 years ago. The room was a little skeptical that HUD was going to actually move quickly on getting any new regs out there. So the request came and was reiterated a couple of times that if HUD doesn't think they're going to get something out there within the next, in a reasonable time frame, the next year or so, can they address some of these issues with additional HUD memos? Well, this isn't obviously the ideal because then you've got regs that are covered by different memos. It would be preferable than waiting 5 years for some kind of 2530 reg change. HUD came back and said again, you know what, we really think that we're going to get this done in the next 12 months. Of course, then 2 weeks later they shut down the government. So I don't know what that does to the timeline, but it appeared from an attendee's perspective that there were a small group of folks at HUD who had been told this is your priority. And been told by the decision makers, this is a priority and something we want you to focus on. So it really looked like this Kathy Sork at OGC was taking the lead on putting the meeting together, taking the lead on putting together the findings and thoughts to take back to HUD. We were hopeful, but it wasn't entirely clear that they were going to have a follow-up meeting with us. The folks on our end that pulled the list of attendees together, clearly we all want to be part of a follow-up, not just, okay, here, come in a room with no agenda and throw out your ideas and we'll take them and do with them what we will. We're hoping that there is a follow-up meeting and that as they make progress, we're going to be part of those items. They even talked a little bit about apps. It didn't go too far. I actually, as you know, and people have said that I do all apps HUD 2530s. They talked a little bit about it, and quite frankly, I tried to stay away from it because apps shouldn't drive the 2530 regulations. 2530s should be driving apps, and I think that the crux of the matter is that what the regulations are and what the regulations require, and then they'll go and fix apps to match whatever that needs to be. There are a couple of things that apps does differently than the 2530 regulations that we all really, really like. And so we want to make sure that stays in play as well. People always ask me, so I'll just kind of go there since I'm already up talking about this. Is HUD going to go back to mandatory electronic? Yeah. I knew that question was going to come, so since I'm already standing, we'll go there. Obviously, I'm in the business of this, so I believe they are. I didn't want to sit in the room and push it, and I'm not going to sit in the room and push it. I wouldn't be a smart business person if I didn't have other options in my company for another line of work if this does go down. But what we have seen, and what I tell folks when I'm doing trainings around the country, is we've seen all kinds of systems go mandatory electronic, right? The financial assessment subsystem, then REAC said, we're not giving you the reports, you have to get them online, right? Then we had the EIV get implemented. All of this stuff is online. HUD's position is, it is easier for us to approve, review, check flags, findings, if you do this electronically. It takes our review from hours to minutes, to come up with if there's any findings and to review that. So it's much, much quicker and easier for us. And as the HUD staff starts to shrink, as they do these realignments, I think it's going to become more prevalent in HUD pushing it. We've already seen HUD field offices around the country pushing 2530, telling you it's required, even though legally it's not required. So I really do believe they're going to go that direction. Do they need to make some additional changes? Yeah, they've been making changes over the course of the year. Was lucky enough to sit on a panel with National Lease Housing that put together a program for HUD that gave them some of the updates and changes they could make to make it easier for us in the industry. So they are listening to those types of things. I think that's where they're going to go. I do think they're going. I've been told by headquarters they're going that way. It was not mentioned in this most recent meeting. So whether that's still one of their priority agendas, whether that's kind of what might be behind this, I don't know yet.
Do you think, Denise, that the reg will come out first and then the mandatory after?
Yeah, that's what I think. But again, that is a guess. I don't want anyone thinking anyone told me that. They didn't. But that's my guess.
The last round of regs that came out that implemented apps certainly said that this is required, and then there was a big backlash from the industry, said this is an unworkable system, so Congress had to get involved to make sure it became paper again until they fixed it. And to HUD's credit, they've really improved the system, but I think given in the past and how they filed in the past, or what they posted in the regs, that's definitely the direction they're going.
Yeah, so that's my strong guess.
And I have to agree with what Denise said, that it really facilitates approval and all towards the working relationship with HUD. If you can make their job easier, it's so much easier to be heard. So it's definitely to your advantage to file electronically to the extent you can.
Don't forget also, you can't run a flag report if you're not in the system.
Yeah, true.
And running that flag report periodically is critical.
How do they flag things if they're not in the system?
I'm sorry?
How do they flag things if they're not in the system? How are they seeing the flags?
The question was, how is HUD seeing the flags if they're not in the system? What we're talking about is having a coordinator or user log in to go into the system and see the flags that HUD placed. The management company is already in the system. Even if you don't have someone in your company logging in, HUD has you in the system. The property's already in the system. So HUD is going in and putting flags on those. I actually let me pull this up really quick. I meant to show you guys a sample flag report in case you haven't seen one. Pull this up. One, two, three, magic. Nope. Oh, I'm sleeping, that's why. Okay, when you run your flag report, that's what you want to see. No flag for selected participant. Okay, if you see that, one of two things has happened. You didn't do step one of the 2 steps on my slide that's on the handout disc you got, and you didn't assign yourself right. So make sure that first step was done. But if you do that first step and you go in and you see that, you're a happy camper, okay? More often, what we will see when we run the flag, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Flag report. And there is a sample flag report on the disc as well. David put these discs together, by the way, so everyone can thank David for putting the disc of our handouts and information together. More often than not, you're going to see a flag report that looks like this. It's going to tell you who is flagged, okay? Flags can be put on owners, they can be put on management companies, they can be put on principals, they can be put on individuals, they can be put on board members, okay? If the company gets a flag, HUD is allowed to flag everybody in the organization structure of that company, okay? Now, if you're in the electronic system and you've built this electronically in apps, when they resolve the flag on the owner of the management company, it will automatically come off all the people below, okay? It will give you a list that hides and masks the tax ID and social security number associated with who was flagged. It's going to tell you what property, okay? Occasionally, the property is blank. I just had one recently, and it had a person's name, and it had a blank, and it had non-compliance, then a HUD obligation, and I thought, that's really bad, because it wasn't even on a property. So, and then I went out of town on a business trip, and I haven't called HUD yet, because they're closed. But we will eventually find out what that's about. The status will always say active, because this is an active flag report. If it wasn't an active flag, it wouldn't be on this report. It's gonna show the creative date. On that example that I gave you of that management company where the owner died and the daughter took over the company and she had a whole slew of flags, what we found out on that non-compliance and HUD obligation flag for the below average MOR score is that the MOR occurred in June and they placed the flag on them in January. Okay, so they just got to their breaking point, went backwards in time to figure out what they could flag folks for. Okay. That actually was a case where I did as much as I could do, and I said, you need legal counsel, and I sent them to Lisa. And then it's always going to say Y for yes under direct flag report, because this is an active direct flag report. Okay, it's not going to show you the flags that have been cured. It's not going to show you the things that aren't active anymore. Okay, but that's what a flag report looks like.
Questions? Surely someone has something that concerns them.
Who has a flag that was on the property in the next block from your property that the property managers told you about over lunch one day? Let's talk about a flag you had, or someone had. Anybody? Otherwise, we'll start telling you about flags we know about. We'd rather talk about your issues, though.
And that's why we're here.
And I do know that there are people here who have flags.
I do have a question, although some of my knowledge of this is a little bit rudimentary, so I apologize if it seems that way. But we acquired a failing property from HUD through quite a complicated process. And it's the one and only property we've ever set up electronically in apps, so that was a bit of
Learning curve.
oh, wow. I still, you know, and the thing is that it was so confusing that I'm not sure that I have learned. I'm sure climbed the curve, because every time I try to do something, there were 3 things I had to step back to do, so I'm not sure I know what the sequence is. Some of the issues resulted because the property ID stays the same. The HUD's name of the property stays the same in the system. And some of the challenges were that everybody previously affiliated with this property was probably flagged like crazy, although I'm not sure I was just aware of flags per se. But since we, rescued this property basically because it was in such bad shape. But some of that was, kind of transferring. There was a lack of clarity certainly with HUD and the parties involved in the online process for apps about what applied to us as a new owner, entirely unaffiliated at all with any of the failing entities. And now, what do you do in this kind of situation? How do you get clarity? How do you help them get clarity? There seems so many layers, and you are probably also familiar with the layers of who's involved in that I may hire you next time to help do that. But struggling through it ourselves.
Did you purchase, was it a TPA, or did you purchase and have a new owner entity created, or did you purchase an interest in an existing entity?
No, it was a new entity. Yeah, we had absolutely no connection whatsoever to the old management agent or owner. So it was our own newly established puzzle.
This is probably too nuanced, but under the direct flag where it says Y, it probably would say N under the prior entities, or for your new organization. So you inherited, in essence, the bad record of the prior owner and the prior entities that were involved. Right, and I think it's a matter, and I'm not sure, but if you looked at your flag report, hopefully it would say N for your group, yes, or you wouldn't see the prior individuals who are involved, but they would have Ys for a direct flag. Yours would be no for direct flag, which means it's indirect, which means it's an inherited problem. And I would emphasize that to HUD, say, take another look at this flag report. It's on there definitely, but it's an indirect flag, and that means we've inherited these problems. We're the good guys, we're trying to fix it. Here's all the proactive stuff we're doing. So that's one way to
But
start.
dialogue is necessary, and it's not something that necessarily makes that obvious to the people involved in the various places you have to go to create something like that.
Yeah, it isn't the most transparent, especially when the flag report comes up and there's a long list, and you've just inherited this property, and it's important. It's a matter of focusing HUD's attention back on. We understand you see these flags, but they're inherited flags. And, we've only been on the job about 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. Here's all the good stuff we're trying to do. Here's our plans for the future. And you can work with your field office to get those flags maybe removed, or have them suspended for a period of time. Say, give us 6 months, and if it's still in bad shape in 6 months or a year, by all means, those will be, derecognize at that point or something.
Has someone from the field office said something to you? Have they expressed concern about the
You know,
flags?
my own lack of clarity is how confusing the process was because we were doing it so blindly in the documentation they had for setting this up on the system.
Yeah, their own instructions are amazing to test. They're
So-
not the most clear.
You know, I don't have a lot of clarity yet for who did what. I knew I had to speak to probably at least 30 people to accomplish this online apps situation.
Here's the thing too on these inherited flags, it shouldn't go, it wasn't part of your participation. So
Right.
while it still may be a flag on the property, because the property ID number in the system stayed the same, it's not a flag on you and your principals.
Right.
Okay, so it shouldn't be on the flag report, okay, as a direct flag. And if it is, then that's when you have those conversations. Well, how can we have a flag on a REACT score from 3 months before we ever even got here,
Right.
right? It
Right.
doesn't apply to you. It does apply to the property. That's the property's history.
Right.
But it actually shouldn't apply to any of the principals of the new management company or the new owner.
And that's really what's
It's a
very
project manager dialogue that you have.
It is.
And they might be able to remove those flags
And checking the flag report's really critical.
and changing from direct to indirect or something.
We actually had a circumstance, we had a friend that had a circumstance, it was the opposite.
We all have good friends.
Where we got a flag, or they got a flag, on a property that, once it got sold, we no longer own the property. And then when we went to go do a development project, that came up, and so HUD was telling us we have to go back and rectify this circumstance. It had to do with REACT issues and everything on a property that we no longer own, so we don't have access to, and we're actually still dealing with that now. So is there a vehicle, or what do you do under those circumstances?
Well, I think the first question would be, why exactly was the flag put on? Was it simply a low REACT score? or were there other issues?
REACT, correct.
Well, you can approach HUD and say, here's why it shouldn't be applied to us, here's why we want it removed, and you can go through the process of getting it removed, and that's actually something I didn't touch on, I probably should, is it's always a good idea to clean up your flag report regardless of what business you have going on with HUD, because in a year you might want to refinance something else or get involved with a new project. So you want to proactively deal with those types of issues when they come up, and if it ends up at the committee level or something like that, hopefully it wouldn't, hopefully at PPSD level they could clear this up. You want to demonstrate that this is not something we could have controlled. We can't go back and fix it. I mean, I've seen those situations where HUD has gone back to previous owners and say, you owe us. It's like, I wasn't involved then, and so forth. So, but it's a matter of trying to get that flag removed when it hits your record and working with HUD to explain the situation, why it shouldn't be on there anymore. And if it takes some time, now's the time to invest it. I'm not going to close right now, but when they come back to work, invest the time now so that it doesn't affect your future applications.
We actually were working with one client up in the Boston area who wanted to sell the property, but they had a failed REACT. And they held off on the sale a little bit, and also worked with the HUD field office to get another REACT inspection done before the sale took place, solely and specifically so they could clean up their record.
Your example is the trickiest ones if you've already left the property and you had that flag before you left. It really is the trickiest ones to get resolved.
Right.
Because
That's
you
why it
don't
takes
have the
time.
ability to make repairs or affect that change that HUD is looking for to resolve the flag. That was a great, I actually have a client that we were doing their 2530 yesterday, and they came up with a 51 REACT score last month. And I said to my staff person that brought this to my attention, said, did you ask them for some explanation so we can put this on the 2530? And she goes, yeah. And I said, when are they putting their appeal in? She goes, no, they're not appealing. They said that this is a slum landlord owner they have, and they won't give them any money for the property to fix it up. And the property should have gotten worse than it got, and they were surprised it got a 51. And I said, well, are they going to do a repair order? No. They're just going to drop the management contract. And I said, they've got to appeal. They've got 10 more days left in their appeal window, and they have got to check to see if they can find those 9 points and appeal, because it's going to stay on their record. I'm going to chat with them tomorrow, but I'm hopeful that they've already been having conversations with HUD about how frustrated they are as the management company dealing with this owner and all the attempts that they've made, because that's how you can also avoid the management company getting that flag if HUD really has that clear message. it's a lot about relationships and making sure HUD knows what you have actually done.
That Boston project is a great example of the relationships and of the importance, as both of these ladies have said, of having a good relationship and a good rapport with your field office. That Boston project, the REAC inspection, and this is thanks specifically to the director of the office up there, because there was a good relationship between the office and the owner. That REAC inspection took place 2 days before the transfer actually took place, and was expedited because of that relationship.
If I could just make a comment to build on what Denise said about filing appeals. There was a time when I read the regulations very literally. It says you may not file an appeal unless you're going to create a statistically significant improvement in the score. So I've occasionally advised clients, you're really too far in the hole, or there's really nothing we can do here, the regs say we can't. I've had HUD use that against us. They say, well, you didn't even try. So ignore the regs that say you can only file an appeal if you're going to statistically move up from a 60 to a 70 or something like that, or up to an 80 or a 90. Because I've seen HUD use it against you for not trying, which is unfortunate.
Don't mess with appeals. Unless you have someone in your office that's done a lot of these and done them successfully, don't mess with them. Go to an expert to do your appeal. It is worth the money that you pay for that, because they know what is and is not appealable, what the documentation is, how it needs to be presented to HUD. It is very valuable. You get one shot at your appeal. Okay. Though, folks, you do know that any of the REAC inspections that happened this calendar year that HUD used the old software on, you can choose to have your score thrown out and get re-inspected, or you can choose, if you got a good score, you want to choose to keep it. Okay?
You should have gotten a letter to that effect.
You should have, yeah.
What should I have? You said that you don't get a flag if you fail the REAC score. What do you do?
HUD made a change. That you used to automatically get a flag for a failed REAC. HUD used to place those immediately until we all started yelling at them and saying, wait a minute, we're still in the appeal period. What are you doing placing a flag 10 days after the REAC inspection came out? We plan to appeal. So now you typically wait a little while to see if an appeal has gone in and come back out before they placed it. They made a change about 2 years in January? 2 years in January. They made a change to understand that, this is kind of silly. A first-time fail REAC, typically, if it's a standalone fail, typically means that they just had a little a misstep, and we don't want to be flagging all these folks. So they said for the first time that you fail, you won't automatically get a flag. You only get a flag for back-to-back failed REAC inspections. Then they realized, oh, well, that's just giving people carte blanche to have a failed REAC and do nothing to fix the property. So they came out with a new memo that said, hey, you have to, I can't remember what it's called, physical condition upgrade report.
Yeah, it's a
Plan of
certification
action.
It's a
process.
plan of action of
Right.
fixing the deficiencies. So if you fail, and it's your first time failing, and you turn in this plan of action to correct the deficiencies within 30 days, I think it is, then they don't have to flag you.
Actually, they're not allowed to.
They're
They're
not
not
allowed,
supposed
like-
to, so that
There
might
you
be a
go.
situation we have to
But that
remind
plan of
them.
action has to cover 100% of the property. It's not simply the cited deficiencies. They expect a
It's-
100% survey.
Yeah, so
It's very similar to the certification they require the owner after a failing REAC, and we should mention this is a little different from the exigent health and safety notices that you may get if there's a electrical issue that's flagged as or a fire, a smoke detector, and so forth. Those have to be fixed immediately, and you have to certify to HUD within 72 hours that that's been taken care of. That's independent of what we're talking about, which is a more comprehensive look at the property, and you need to put in that certification to HUD along with your report of all the repairs that have been made. I think it's 60 days actually that you have to submit that report.
don't do the REAC.
Because you need 60 days because you have to say, this is everything we've done, so they give you adequate time to make the
And
repairs.
they'll give you extensions. if
They
needed.
will, but
I actually have a question too, because I'm not really clear on. You have your 30 days to file your appeal and your 60 days to do the physical condition. So I have folks going, why am I going to put a whole physical condition report together if I'm going to appeal and I know these are appealable and I think I'm getting these 5 points back? What do you advise folks to do? To do both anyway?
that's a good one.
That's a good- well,
It's hard,
the first
yeah,
question
mine's
is,
a lot of work.
How confident are you that you're going to be successful? Is it a slam dunk type of thing? Or is it one of those appeal items where it's real iffy and such as a work in progress appeal? Work in
Right.
progress is a moving target. You're allowed to appeal based on work in progress. If you look at the rule book, Work in progress has to be a detailed, magnificent, big MIO plan or action plan, which has been approved by HUD. As a matter of practice, REACT's been bouncing all over the place. We've seen work in progress for something as simple as there was a broken window, and here's a work order that shows we ordered the work to be done 2 days before the REACT inspection. We've had those approved, we've had those disapproved. So it's a work in progress. So, on the other hand, if you're dealing with things such as an electrical box, and you know the electrical box is dead, so, and you have the electrician that came and certified to that effect, you're gonna win that appeal. So, where are you in that range?
Well, as a legal issue, you are making a certification to HUD that these issues have been taken care of. So if you're saying to HUD, I fixed the electrical box that didn't need fixing, then we always sort of qualify that, and we'll say, an electrical box, this is being appealed, we're submitting an electrician's letter to prove that there was no power going to this box, or something like that. So you've covered all your bases. You've explained why you're not fixing something, because there's legally no reason to fix it, and you're explaining the documentation that's going in.
Basically, what you're doing is you're modifying the certification for the EH&S,
So you're not-
where you're saying, we have satisfactorily addressed all of the following, except for this which we are appealing. And you use language like this is suggested.
Right, right. You never want to falsely certify to HUD,
No.
so it's always worth taking the time, and this is why, it's worth getting an attorney involved if necessary to sort of nuance that language so that you're giving an accurate representation of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, and cognizant of those time periods. It's actually, we say it's a 30-day appeal window. Technically, there's 45 days for conditions that are outside of the owner's control. As a general matter, I try to urge clients to go towards 30 days regardless, just because it can be very difficult to sort of parse what's outside of the owner's control and what's an inspector error, for example. So it's just safer to try to stick with 30 days, but that, just keep in mind there is a 45-day period as well for, say an owner and your next door neighbor has a fence that's falling down, you were cited for it because it's adjacent to your property, you have a little extra time to prove that that's not your fence.
If you had a flag on a property and you sold the property with the flag, and then the new owner had it removed, does it get removed off your record too, or are you stuck with it for life?
You're stuck with it, but that's not to say you can explain. Look, you can see the places, but you don't really know what the new owner got, but you're pretty much stuck with it, but not for life. You can try to get it removed and explain, all right, this is the circumstances, this is what happened, here's all the ways that we were trying to work on it, these are the conditions we couldn't control. But it's going to take more of a dialogue with HUD to try and get that removed.
Even though the condition, the failed REACT has been corrected,
They're going to make the argument you weren't part of the solution,
Oh.
so you have to explain how, this is what we would have done, or this is what we were in the process of doing, but we were kicked off the project. They decided to change management, but these are all the things we tried to do, but the owner wasn't working with us, or whatever your situation happens to be.
It could be that you're the one that made the contracts that resulted in the fixes being put into place.
One thing real quick about, go ahead.
If you have below average MOR, there's below average MOR, is there any process of appealing to HUD over the contract administrator's determination that it's below average?
Absolutely.
Would you mind repeating?
The question was, if you get a below average MOR, is there any process for appeal of the MOR rating? The answer is absolutely. The regulation is that you have 30 days to appeal to the contract administrator or the field office. And if that fails, there's a second level appeal, which goes to the HUD director. And that's kind of a goodie because you can specifically request, and the handbook says this, you can request a meeting with the HUD director. So it's not simply putting the paperwork together, which is critical. That paperwork is critical, but you have the opportunity to verbally present your case.
Same for unsatisfactories as well. You
Yeah.
can always appeal these ratings. It's all about documentation, and what helps now is the new MORs are now, there's a numerical standard, or they've tried to move away from some of the subjectivity. So you can go in there and say, this is why we think we should have gotten a 3 instead of a 5 or a 1 and so forth. So
It's worth mentioning, by the way, and this is something that NYAHMA is doing. We've learned that in the New York office, they've modified the process, and management reviews that are being done by the New York office staff, as opposed to the contract administrator, they're only giving 15 days to do the appeal. And NYAHMA has already put that on the agenda for our next discussion with HUD.
I wouldn't ask this with HUD representatives out here. So, this, any other HUD compliance issue flag? And who who amongst us has probably not dealt with a somewhat irrational or rude or kind of awful project manager at some point in our lives? We own a number of projects that we, statistically, have more opportunity to do that. But, some of that it seems to me be very subjectively retaliatory, which is unprofessional, no doubt illegal, and whatnot. So I thoroughly appreciate the value of the good relationship, although the quality of what's really going on should trump someone's attitude problem, if you may.
Right.
So each of you find yourself in that situation. Where's the first, second, and third place to go? Not that we've had this situation, I'm happy to say, nor have any of my friends.
Right.
When I get these calls, I refer them to Lisa.
I don't know. if
No,
anyone's
no,
taken this
I
step.
mean,
Yeah, I have requested, and when the relationship is really toxic, is a reassignment to a different project manager. You go up the chain, basically. If the project manager is completely irrational, won't deal with you, and is not playing ball, basically, you go up to their supervisor. Sometimes the supervisory staff isn't sufficient. You have to go to the HUD director or the office manager or something like that. But on rare occasions, I've had to say, the Alabama office is not playing with the ball with my client at all. We need to be removed to Oklahoma or something like that. So that can happen if you have that kind of a really tainted relationship.
and it's better to have a third party rather than the emotion that you're bringing to the table
Yes.
at that point,
Because you have to show the track record of, these are all of our requests, this is how we're summarily denied, it helps also that if you have that sort of national exposure, or just, you can draw it, this is only happening here, I'm only here am I asked to justify my budgets down to the penny, or that kind of thing. So if you can demonstrate the irrationality or the unequal treatment you're getting, that's to your advantage.
But you want to make sure it really is irrational.
Right.
Some of why the folks in the room at the 2530 meeting that I participated in headquarters were talking about, can you put these policies and practices in writing? So that then you're looking at that going, well, they did this, and it says right here that they can't, you have a little bit more to go back and politely say to this erratic HUD person, because we've all met them, unfortunately. I don't understand. Here it says this. I'm a little confused. Could you help me understand? It gives you a little bit more to point to that HUD is written on. There was a question.
I was just going to touch on the last question that the gentleman posed. You guys were kind of touching on it, but from the opposite direction. If you have a property that gets a below average, not necessarily unsatisfactory, but below average, and you have a good working relationship with your PM, I think you also want to be careful and appeal, because if it's a direct HUD PM, then you're essentially saying that you don't trust what he did, right? And so now you create that issue between you and that project manager, whereas if you have a good relationship with them, it's probably easier to just resolve the problem and get a different score.
Yeah, that's a good point about potential. The question for everyone who might not have heard it is the concern about that relationship. If you file an appeal, are you risking alienating the HUD person who performed that review, particularly now that the PDCAs are really not working in every jurisdiction? That's a fair concern. I've had clients who sometimes decide, I just don't want to rock the boat, I don't want to go there, or I have another deal pending with this office, and if I appeal this, they're going to sanction me over there. In those situations, I can totally respect that. I also recommend that maybe that person place a phone call, say, look, please don't take this personally, I'm doing this to preserve our options here. It's not that I disagree with you personally, but I have some questions here, and see if you can talk it through, so you've broken the ice, so that when that letter with all your documentation and the appeal arrives on their desk, they don't feel like you've slapped them in the face. So again, it's a good point about there are positives and negatives to filing appeals, and you have to judge whether it's worth that, or if you have an acrimonious situation, whether that's going to ramp things up and make it even more ugly. So good point.
As a practical matter, while there definitely is retaliation sometimes, we've found that if you're going to do an appeal and you speak, as Lisa said, to the person, and basically say, look, I don't want to surprise you, I'm going to be doing an appeal. If we can't work, I respect your right, you disagree with me, we're going to do an appeal, I just don't want you to be surprised about it. I've yet to see retaliation on that basis.
Yeah, and it's not even retaliation that I'm worried about, more than you change perception of every conversation. So it's what happens tomorrow in the relationship that we had, and all of a sudden I'm talking to you and the feedback is not the same. So,
I think that phone call would help you
right.
get over that, and also sort of break the ice with respect.
It's not the doing of it, it's how you do it.
Right.
Yeah.
so
And also, I've had to rein in clients who want to throw the book at HUD and say, you know, you, not idiot, they're not gonna say that, but they're saying, you know, what you fail to understand is like, not a good approach with HUD. I mean, you wanna say, you know, with all due respect, or perhaps you didn't see this, and we've already sent you that. I mean, I'm big on sending in things again, because you're rebuilding your paper record or your administrative record. It never hurts to make the case again, and then it helps your reviewer because you have everything you need there to justify your position. They don't have to go hunting through the folder or whatever, scattered locations. So.
You know, go ahead.
Is there a report with respect to the financial audit findings? We had a couple of flags that go back probably 7, 8 years. Is there a report that you can pull up to find out what year in particular that finding would be for?
I'm not very familiar with the different, it was for not
Let's say
addressing
it
something,
was-
it was a finding on the financial?
Or
Or a failed?
Say it again?
Was it a finding,
Say
it was an
unresolved
unresolved
financial-
finding on your financial report?
Unresolved audit or
Unresolved,
something like that, yeah. There's no way of looking at the report. The only way is to really talk to HUD. You will sometimes, we've had clients who come in with denial letters for new business, and they say, well, you were flagged in 2007 for the 2004 audits or something like that.
That's what I'm trying to
There's
find
really no
out.
way of knowing unless you get that letter, and because, as Denise mentioned, the flags can be placed really at any time. It could be some non-compliance. I think the statute of limitations is technically 6 years, so fortunately, 6 years prior, HUD shouldn't be flagging for anything that old, but they have a 6-year window, so they could go back and, what is this, 2013? It could be 2007, you could be flagged for something now. And so the flag might be appearing in now or 2010, but it really pertains to an earlier year, and you won't know which audit unless you get on the phone and call them. And then I would say get it in writing, because if I've written in a letter, you know, you told me, it's always better if I have an email saying, you know, pursuant to your email, this is the issue, but my client was not even involved with this organization back then, so this flag needs to be lifted. So that's, flag doesn't go into that kind of detail, unfortunately.
And it tells you when it was placed, but again,
It doesn't tell you the underlying cause.
One of the things that we've actually asked HUD at the meeting several weeks ago is to add a column to the flag report that tells us which HUD field office person placed the flag. HUD can see that when they go in to see the flag report on their side of the system, but we can't see that. And the first thing you need to do is contact who placed the flag. It's been said a couple of times already today to make sure you address those things right away. One of the problems that people that don't address their flags right away can potentially face is that person that placed the flag isn't at HUD anymore. Maybe they retired, maybe they moved on to a different job, maybe they're in a different field office, and when you call about some property in Oklahoma, they don't care anymore, okay?
You certainly don't have the records.
Yeah, so your best bet is to get that resolved with the person who placed it. If the person who placed it is no longer with HUD or in that field office, it is harder, because you then have to go up the chain, get someone's attention. That person that wasn't intimately involved with the issue in the first place is gonna take a much more careful, slower look at it before they just check that box and unflag you for any issue, because they wanna make sure they haven't made a mistake. So it's always better to do this as quickly as you can.
So that's my situation.
Yeah.
The two that I found, the personnel have retired, since retired. So the current PM is, I guess, taking their time and resolving it.
You need to go up the next
Yeah, you
level.
might have
You need to
to
go
go
to the
to
supervisor, project
yeah.
manager, or
Right.
the director, or somebody. You need to go up the chain.
And again, part of that relationship is, you know, I'm sorry, I need to sort of ramp this up to you, supervisor. I'm not, no disrespect, you know, sort of to get to your point about if you start to ramp things up, it's all about how you do it, so that we're not hindering the relationships in the future.
A PM can't resolve a flag placed by another PM.
Right, it usually
It does
has to
have to
be
be
the-
resolved at a higher level.
Right.
So she can look into it for you, but she can't actually, isn't gonna be the one that resolves it.
And sometimes it's a matter of sharing the documentation with them so that they feel emboldened that they can go to their boss, or that's where it has to go. So they don't feel as if you're, you know, super circumventing them or something.
Could the PM, however, be able to pull up what year?
They
is
should
in
be able
question?
to.
Yes.
And they would be able to share that with me?
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Once you have the year, the audit will show you the findings, right? The audit will, at least, I
Not
know some of our
necess-
audit, the audits that we get, there'll be findings in there, than the auditors find. I know all different auditors do different things, but at least with some of the auditors that we use, there will be actual findings in there, and so we try to address
Right.
those before.
Right.
Exactly, yeah, that if folks are
Which
going,
is- You might be talking about findings that HUD had found outside, that might even go beyond.
Well, this,
what the
yeah,
auditor
right,
found.
it might, yeah. I just don't know.
It probably could be.
right, because the CPAs are required to call out certain findings, and those are definitely gonna generate another, inquiry from HUD, or how are you addressing this? But there are other issues, and I actually have an ancient Freedom of Information Act request that HUD never filed about asking, because they also will compare your bad debts, for example, to some other ratio and figure out if the bad debts are too high and we don't know what they're comparing it to, or so forth, or the occupancy rates get to a certain level, that's gonna be a HUD-generated finding. Your CPA won't call that out, because that's not part of their guidelines with respect to review the financial statements, but HUD has other criteria that will generate an inquiry, and we don't really know what those criteria are.
So let me tell you too about, a little about the electronic system and when there's audit findings. I mentioned earlier that whoever's the coordinator or user in the system assigned to the property, if the filing is late, gets an automatic notice. When they have findings, they're supposed to send out those same automatic notices. Okay, so you need to make sure that whoever your compliance person is that has access to the property online, that they've also signed themselves up for access to the FASUP system, so that it will recognize them as the coordinators, and they'll also get those notices. You don't want, I mean, while you trust your CPA and they should be doing their job, and if they get that kind of notices, let you know. We all know sometimes that doesn't happen, or internal auditors at different companies leave. So if they're the only one that has that coordinator access in the system, and they're getting those or not forwarding them to you, but when a finding does come up, there is a finding form email letter that goes out to the coordinator. So make sure that whoever your person is has access to that system too, even if they're not doing any kind of filing in there, and then they should be on the list to get those notices as well. Doesn't help you with your old one, but future. We're being proactive about the future. Right.
Yes.
I'm curious, you mentioned about HUD having their behind-the-scene notes and comments. Does an owner and managing agent ever have access to that? That's completely internal.
It's internal communication.
On occasion, you get lucky.
But we can't see it. We can
Right, yeah.
find out about it.
Right.
Relationships are everything.
Right.
And that's why if it's a project that's had a long existence,
Yeah.
it'd be nice to know what's on there.
If you have a good relationship with the field office, you can sit down with the manager, the PM, and ask them, and have an off-the-record even conversation about what's really happening at the project. It's all a matter of relationships.
The New York office has to be commended, because a couple of years ago, HUD started coding the audited financial statements with red, yellow, and green, depending on the strength of the property based on these unnamed HUD conditions that they were analyzing. And the New York office shared, not the criteria, but they would tell people, well, I'm sorry, you have an orange property, so I have to look a little deeper. When it started, us in the industry started questioning, what does that mean? And the headquarters basically shut them up and said, you can't talk about this. This is an internal system. So you have a very open field office, fortunately, that's willing to share that type of information.
Can I piggyback on Michael's question for a second? If there aren't any problems, you're not doing new activity, you have very little contact with your project manager, actually. So, David, do any of you have good recommendation for how to develop some continuity with that relationship when you're really in a non-problematic mode? Do you know?
If you have anything that you have to submit, hand carry it.
I would
Put your face in front of the person. If it's a replacement reserve request, you don't have to mail it. If you haven't spoken to your PM for a long time,
Yeah, I think of many times
I
I
would-
really haven't had.
I would hand carry it, and then you have a
Just
chance to
introduce
just speak for a
yourself,
couple of
yeah.
moments.
Also, if you have something happening at your properties, it's great to, I know travel funds are limited. Fortunately, in New York area, it's not too hard for them to get around. Invite them to ribbon cuttings, or if there's some kind of an event happening at your property. It's great to have them out there. That's not only wonderful for relationship building, but also it helps to sort of give them something positive to focus on, and something that they can put in their, get their regional newsletters. They'll have pictures of HUD people at certain events. That's great. It gets your name out there. That gets distributed out to the entire field office distribution list or regional offices. So any kind of time you can invite them out. They may not always come, but at least you've extended the invitation. So, and when I was a HUD employee, I'd occasionally have people stop in and say hello, which was really nice. Like you kind of toil away in obscurity, and then, whoa, here's someone here to say hello. So it's kind of nice.
I hear a lot of complaints about from folks like you guys about the inconsistencies, people that have properties in different HUD jurisdictions, the inconsistency in field offices. And I tell them, you know, you gotta, it's like any business. If you've got a large company that has offices in different parts of the country, and you've got a different regional manager in each office, that regional manager, while they're carrying out the same directives, same mission, same goal, following the same company handbook, is gonna have different sensitivities. You know, that things that they are more focused on or care more about, things that they care a little bit less about, things that they push on a little bit more than somebody else. So it's not just HUD being inconsistent across the country, it's just kind of the way big business works. When you've got different offices with different directors and different focuses and different things that are their hot buttons. You may have been in a company once for a number of years and then got a new boss. It's the same work, it's the same department, it's the same thing, and all of a sudden the job has changed because you got a new boss with a little bit different take and a little bit different direction. And that's really what we're seeing across the country. So knowing what the requirements are, and Lisa touched on this earlier, and just going, oh, well, you know, here's this memo. I mean, I had the Georgia HUD office call and say, well, we want to have all these people. You didn't list everybody on the 2530. And I said, well, we're not required to. Well, but we want to see it. Well, no, we're not required to, so we're not going to. But I don't know, where'd you see, you know, I very nicely gave them the HUD memo. Well, you know, there was a HUD memo that came out in 2007 that said we didn't need to list these people. Well, what are you talking about? And I gave her the memo, and they thanked me, actually, you know, for pointing out to them in a nice, kind way that we weren't going to give them what they were asking us for because we didn't have to, but very, very nicely. But they didn't have the memo. I don't know why they didn't have the memo. They said they'd never seen it. No one in their department had seen it. You know, so there's just some of those inconsistencies sometimes, and help them out. Be a little more understanding sometimes with some of those different ways. You know, even in your same office, one person might do a job one way, another person might do the same job very differently.
We have the room for another 20 minutes. Well, we have to be out of here in 25 minutes.
Okay.
That's why I said 20.
Let me give you guys, someone mentioned about, you know, if there's a REACT that happens after you left the property and you don't know the score necessarily or whatever. I want to give you guys a resource, actually, especially for folks that are taking on new managed projects or looking to purchase an existing HUD property. I tell anyone that if you're looking for any information from HUD, do not go in and go to the main page of the HUD.gov website. Do not use the search engine at the HUD.gov website. You will not find what you're looking for. Have you ever gone there and tried to find something, can't find it? Here's how you find something on the HUD.gov website. You go to Google. This does not work as well in Yahoo and Bing. You want to go to Google. You want to type in HUD.gov. You want to hit the space bar on your keyboard, and then you want to type in whatever you're looking for. Transfer of physical assets, modified TPA, REACT inspections, whatever you're looking for. There's tons and tons of great resource material at the HUD.gov website. The problem is people can't find it. So start in Google, HUD.gov space, whatever you're looking for, okay? There is a resource out there for REACT inspection scores. The last 3 REACT inspection scores on every current HUD property in the country, okay? HUD.gov, REACT scores by state. Google it. It'll give you a list of states. You'll click on the state. It'll have a list in the order of cities. Under each city, it'll list the properties. It looks like it's listing them in alphabetical order under the cities, but it's not always listed in alphabetical order under the cities. It's mostly alphabetical order, and it's occasionally not. So make sure you look all the way down if you're looking for a property and you can't find it. If you're going to take on a new third-party managed contract, and they say, oh yeah, we've been doing really well on our REACT scores, go to REACT scores by state at the HUD.gov website and look it up and see what their last 3 REACT scores. Okay, this report gets updated quarterly, and I use the quotes because it's HUD quarterly. That could be 3 months, that could be 6 months. But it'll give you a snapshot. It's not going to show you the REACT score that happened last month necessarily, but it is going to give you that picture. And you can find out after you left the property if it actually did then, you know, wait a number of months. You can go back and find it and see if it did well. Okay. So just a resource for folks. All right. I do not know, I always get the question then, where about MOR scores? Sorry, you're out of luck there. I don't know any site, if anyone, I always say, if you know a site, somebody tell me. I don't know any site where you can get that same kind of information. They are public knowledge information as well. It's not hidden. I can actually find it in the app system because I know how to manipulate the system. I can find any score on any property in the country for MOR or REACT for any year. But you have to have that kind of higher level app's ability to do that. But I don't know any public area where you can get those just on the internet. Sorry about that, but the REACTs you can.
And that was due to industry advocacy
Yeah.
on behalf of the REACT scores, so it's, and also the tenants want that information.
I do need, because of the shutdown, this is one thing. Anyone that had a REACT inspection that the score report was not posted yet, so it occurred probably in the last, that last 10-day period before the shutdown, it won't be posted until the shutdown's over. So I actually have someone that had a failing REACT, they got a re-inspection. The re-inspection occurred exactly 1 week before the shutdown. The report was not released yet because they have to, the REACT inspector has to upload it and then HUD has to review it and then they have to release it and they get released on Thursdays and Fridays. It was not released that Thursday and Friday, the government shut down the next week. That report, even though they think they got a 90, now they've got a failing score and they're going in for a refiling of the property. They've got an issue now on their 2530, but they have a new score that they can't get and that they don't know what it is because there's no one at HUD to release the report. So there are scores that are being held hostage in that little tiny time frame.
They're released Thursday? I thought they were released on Wednesdays. It's Thursdays and
Delta told me
Fridays.
Thursdays and Fridays.
Thursdays and Fridays.
If you have new activity.
Is it Wednesday? Someone said Wednesday.
Yeah, sometimes Wednesday after.
Oh, okay.
If you need to be adding a new board
Was it
member.
Thursday, Friday? I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you need to be adding a new board member at this point or something in your 2530, do you think we should wait until the shutdown's over? Or should we go ahead and proceed in the system to try to do things? What's your sense of timing?
You can register new entities and individuals in the business partner registration system. You can request key codes, but they're not going to come. There's nobody at HUD to give them out. So our hands are a little bit tied in the system right now. Anything you already have access to, you can go ahead and submit. There's nobody at HUD to review it. So it's kind of a judgment call.
I would say that
We're every day, we're doing this like this every day with every single client about what to do, what not to do, how much to queue up, how much not to queue up, whether to send, whether not to send, whether to hit the send button and send it and upload it so it's in their queue. But we have no idea when HUD gets back, whether they're going to open their email in the order it was received or whether they're going to be just overwhelmed with it and ignore it for a while, or you just don't know. Personally, and everyone's making their own decisions on this. Personally, I'm not shooting HUD emails to put it in their queue so when they get back they have 1,000 of them. I'd rather wait, give them 2 days to catch up on whatever they have to catch up, and then start sending them that's how I'm personally handling it. Send my emails or make my phone calls, but it's a judgment call. Other people have different.
I would just say, if you're out of compliance, let's say, or if you're about to do a board change, or I would get it in sooner rather than later, because then you can show, I got it in on this date. I know you couldn't act on it, but you've at least met your obligation. So that's important, to keep in mind. But Denise's point is well taken, that they're gonna be completely overwhelmed when they get back.
It's a balancing. Everyone makes their decision.